Hello, everyone. This is Stuart Cohen. Thanks so much for logging into our session today around maturing your MSP business. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes, just waiting for some of your colleagues to log in. But thank you very much for attending today's session, and be thinking about questions you have for Tim at Gradient to talk about how your MSP can take the next level up, the next step up. To support cybersecurity, or if you're a sophisticated MSSP, what are some things that you ought to be doing next to get ready for the next wave of cybersecurity attacks and requirements from your clients? We'll get started in just a second or two.
So as we're waiting to get started, Stuart, I see the golf clubs there in the background. How often do you get out?
Not often enough.
Right, that's the answer. So I'll start off with a little story. So years ago, I was golfing and and it was just involved in a nice little, just out for a day, whatever the deal is. So one of the guys I was golfing with, he was telling me a story because I got mad and I threw a club, right? And this guy would kind of used to be the same way. He was laughing. He's like, I did that once. He goes, I was playing with a bunch of guys. They got mad and I threw the club. And he said the guy I was playing with looked at me and said, what are you doing? You're not good enough to get that mad. And I was like, that really reflects on how I actually play, right? Like I like driving the cart around. I like hitting the white balls. I do better in scrambles by all means, because about 1 out of every 4 shots is straight.
Well, we've got a few more people that have logged in, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll continue our podcast later on golf and experiences around the golf course. But today I want to thank Tim for joining us. We got connected with Gradient. They're doing some fantastic things to help the MSP marketplace really grow, really come together, really mature. And as we look from a Nodeware standpoint and IGI Cyber Labs and IGI Cybersecurity Services, the requirements out there on small and mid-sized enterprises to need help, need assistance, need MSPs and MSSPs, need assessments, need penetration tests, need VCSOs, need billing capabilities. They need all sorts of things to make themselves more productive, and at the same time to be responsive to the needs of their clients, their prospects, and how they're interested in growing their business. And we talk a lot about MSPs that have a not only a desire, but a capability to grow and grow very rapidly as the marketplace is really looking for assistance. So that was really the background for today's session and as well the session we're going to have in June. Please submit, your questions in the chat box or question box. We'll do our best to get to all of them. It will also be recorded, so it'll be available on YouTube in the next couple of days. We'll also have copies of these slides, and we've got some backup slides that we may not get to today that we'll be able to provide you about some things as well that can help you in your business. So with that, I want to introduce Tim and let him kind of give his perspective on, as a guy who's been in the MSP business for a long time, and now with what Gradient is doing to really help the MSP community, maybe start with your perspective on, if you're an IT-oriented MSP, how do you get started? And if you're a sophisticated MSP in cybersecurity, what do you need to do next? So Tim, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, so thanks, Stuart. I appreciate you guys having me on and having Gradient on. It's we love to partner in this. We call it an ecosystem, right? If you've been on our website, you see a lot of great graphics and stuff, and it really is about this ecosystem and about helping, in general, the MSP become more solidified in what they're doing, because the more the MSP becomes solidified and the more we can help them, then the better it's going to be for our entire ecosystem, the community, the clients, the whole 9 yards. So we do appreciate having us on. I am Tim Coach. As you guys can see from my slide, my title is the Director of Kick-Ass MSP. I can get that into a second. But just a little bit about me. So one, I was the client. So everybody we're talking to today, I was the person they worked with as the client. I had fairly large systems. I'd like to tell the story that, back in the early 2000s, my SQL licensing was $250,000 a year. So that'll kind of give you a scale at how big the infrastructure was. So I've done all that, right? I've had small users, I've had large users. And then from there, I just got lucky. I get bored real easily and I want to move around and do things. And I got an opportunity to come to work as an MSP. So I started out as a service desk guy, right? Just managing the service desk, tickets, dispatch, that kind of thing. And then just over the years, that continued to grow and grow to where I really became, by the end, I became a COO, right? And what that means is I ended up basically touching anything operational from a company standpoint. Now I did that from a procedures and process standpoint because that's my background. I got a military background, and process procedures, I think you can teach anybody to do about anything with the right manual and the right amount of time to do it. And then I came over to the channel side, right? So some people call it the dark side. I think it's really great side. But what they want me to do is a couple different things. So I talk in depth about our Gradient products, billable and synthesize. And then the bigger thing they want me to do is they just want me to help MSPs grow, right? I went in and either completely rebuilt or streamlined 5 MSPs from start to finish in my later years. And then on top of that, I consulted with many more. So that's why we're here today to talk about how do we help MSPs either go from a break fix model to an MSP model, or maybe how to make that standpoint, or how to take someone that's been doing this a few years and they're really kind of more mature, step into that next model as an MSSP. Should they, right? That's a big question. That's not a lot of people talk about that. Should you be an MSSP or should you partner with somebody? But in the end, Stuart, one of the phrases you always say, and it's extremely important for the industry to understand this on every level. It doesn't matter if you're what we call a trunk slammer, which is a one-man shop, or you've got a multi-million-dollar company. Cyber hygiene is important across the board from anybody. And we probably want to talk a little bit about that as well to understand really what that means, because some of the newer people that are, I was a tech and now I've started my own MSP, or I'm a business guy and I'm with an MSP, like they really need that help into understanding what that is.
Well, and Alan Alford, who's is on our advisory council. He is the CISO and Chief Security Officer at TrustMap. He always talks about, if you're just getting started, there's the 3 legs of the stool. There's understanding what devices you have, and / which ones are now new to your network that you need to be worried about. And 2, providing some multi-factor authentication. And 3, providing a little bit of education so you can get your folks just a little bit smarter and a little bit stronger and a little bit safer, as kind of the 3 legs of getting started in cyber hygiene. And I'm just curious from your perspective, kind of how do you think about that? How does Gradient think about that? And then, when you were an MSP, how did you take that first couple of steps?
So cyber hygiene in general and security in general, whether it's me as an MSP, whether it's Gradient, whether it's you all, whoever it is, it's a layered solution, right? There's no one stop fits everything, right? We take it. I think I heard the analogy of Swiss cheese one time, right? You got slices of Swiss cheese and there's holes all through them, right? And then if you take those slices and you turn each one just like a quarter turn, then what happens is those holes no longer match up to push through. So you got, your firewall, your AV, you got companies out there like Huntress, you got ThreatLocker, some of these other companies, and those are all individual layers to make sure those cyber hygiene aspects are taken care of. And I would say, keep in mind that the reason why we layer those is to make sure that we're covering each and every aspect of security. And the other part of that is if it touches the internet in general, cyber hygiene, cyber security should absolutely be top of mind. Now, the problem is you take this stack of Swiss cheese slices, right? And then you get an end user, and what's that end user going to do, right? They're going to put their finger in the middle and just stick it all the way through, right? So you get that hole. So the aspect of actually training and educating your end users is extremely important from the aspect of they're the ones, whether they mean to or not. And there is never a person out there that says, you know what, I want to come to work today and I want to destroy the company, right? Or I want to leak an email, or I want to lose $80,000 to a scam. Nobody does that. But just their nature is to click on things. And as we've seen over the years, it's getting more and more sophisticated of how we're being attacked. So we have to train them. So from the Gradient side of the house, security is always top of mind. I mean, we work with an API into their system, and we're getting data from our partners, right? So to ensure that we are absolutely top of the mind secure, that's a no-brainer for us. We brought in a gentleman by the name of Matt Topper. He's a huge security guy. Matter of fact, you can go out on our YouTube channel, and he's starting to produce videos to help MSPs better understand how to be more secure. We also talk about our SOC and what type we are, and just all this stuff that relates to security, because that's really, it's not an easy process, but it's the first process that you can tell a partner or a client, hey, we are secure, we do take it seriously, here's the process we've been through and the certification we have, to ensure that they know up front that there's nothing more important than their security. Now, when we go back to the MSP world, right, how do we do that? Well, we go in to the client, a lot of us will do assessment, we'll do ping tests, we'll penetration tests, we'll do these different things trying to access their information to get it, and then we start locking those down, right? Now, I was taught the layer model, right? That's kind of an older way. I don't think a lot of people learn that anymore. But you really start at layer one and work your way all the way up. And how do you secure each one of those, right? So for me, I always took it from an aspect of, I got an internet line being fed to me from an ISP, so I don't trust that. So the first thing I gotta do is put a firewall in, right? Well, I don't want anybody from the outside world to know I exist. So I have to shut off any ability for the outside world to see me or to see one of my clients as a business, right? And then I set up those trusted connections to allow them to do that. So now I've got my internet taken care of. Now I've got my servers. Well, my servers handle all my data, right? Nowadays, a lot of them just set up in the cloud. We don't do a lot of on-prem anymore, right? But those servers are still very restrictive. Who has access? Why do they have access? Are there anything open on that server that should be closed down that's easily seeable, right? Then we move on down to the PCs, kind of the same thing, right? We use software to lock down USB keys and don't allow people to download things, this and that, right? And then you move to probably what is our greatest asset and also our greatest vulnerability, if you will, which is the end user, right? So we have to train them. We can't expect them to know that if you get an email from Microsoft and there's a 0 instead of an O, that they're naturally going to know how to look at that. So we have to teach them what to look for. And there are a plethora of great products out there that absolutely does that. So once again, super layered effect, always putting those steps in to ensure that you're taken care of. Then you take it one step further when you become a bit mature, right? So now not only are you worried about the information that's coming into your house, you got to start working about the information that's going out of your house, right? So if you did get, if there was a breach or a vulnerability or something, and your server's being used to host something else, well, in the old days, we really didn't monitor what was going out of our network, just what was coming in. So that's kind of the way you take it from each step. That's the way I handle it. I think if anything touches the internet, it's got to have security. It's got to be clean. From the Gradient perspective, there's nothing more critical than the security of our data, period, because it's our clients' data, right? And then lastly, most importantly, the MSP, those that are critical, taking care of the working force of America, because that's who we're supporting, right? I mean, whether you're creating a widget, you're providing a service, you're selling something, whatever the scenario is, that's who we support. We have to make sure they're secure in what they're doing, and we have to do it that allows them to have the least amount of latency and the most amount of efficiency as they're trying to do their job.
you brought up something about internet connected, and it's a question that we get all the time, which is, well, as I've moved more and more of my business to the cloud, what do I need from an MSP? And the answer is, very simple from our standpoint is, well, do you have printers? Do you have cameras? Do you have doorbells? Do you have IoT devices that are left in your office or maybe at home that are important to you that, oh, by the way, connect to your device, that connect to that server in the cloud with that critical data? And maybe it's the, Bellagio fish tank that, got hacked
Right.
into, that got into the ransomware attack at the Bellagio, or the air conditioner at Target. It's all about, the IoT devices. And one of the things, we provide, unlimited free agents for people who want to put an agent on a corporate laptop when they use it on the road and they're not in their office. But now we have a lot of people putting sensors on that corporate laptop when they're working at home because they want to know what's on their Wi-Fi that might be connected to that corporate laptop, that might be connected to critical data that might be in the cloud. And we're not getting into the home networking and home security business, but it's interesting how many executives we have using sensors on their corporate laptop while working at home, especially with the whole hybrid workforce. Maybe that's something you could talk about, how kind of that's changed, the marketplace, if you will, and how MSPs need to respond to hybrid workforces.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the crazy thing about this is we would have never in that March timeframe a couple years ago, we would have never thought about sending our workforce home. It just wouldn't have been irrelevant. When we did, think about how restrictive that was. You had to have a point-to-point VPN connection. You had to have, the company had to control everything on your laptop. It was just a very secure way of doing it. And now all of a sudden, as we moved more towards the cloud, it's like that access is gone. There's no more point-to-point connection because now you're connecting with Azure, you're connecting with another hosted provider or whatever the scenario is. And I think where we're still kind of lacking in our security stack is how are we securing devices like mine, right? So I'm on the road 50 weeks out of the year, if not more, right? Everything that I have access to is in a cloud, right? Gradient doesn't have an office. We all work 100% work from remote, but how do we secure those? So now you're having the conversation about having those other types of VPNs that are out there, and there's several that's out there, and I've researched a bunch of them, that allows me to still have a secure, encrypted, protected connection, right? So other people aren't contacting me specifically, but we still have to find that piece of the security stack that allows road warriors and people who are working from in that primarily, right, in that hybrid force to work from home and still know they're secure, because the ways that we used to do it no longer work. And why don't they work? Because we don't have on-prem devices. We are pushing as an entity, as an ecosystem, we're driving people to the cloud. Now you can talk about Azure, you can talk about AWS, you can talk about, one of the companies I used to use a lot out there was a company called Green Cloud. Just whatever hosting services out there. We used to have these secure connections that an employee would have to VPN into us, into our office, to then VPN into wherever our servers were, right? A lot of times we put them in a data center. So that was kind of the cloud before the cloud came about, right? It was data centers. Now we've removed all that. So you literally get on your computer, you click, I want to go to Microsoft for my email. It connects to Microsoft's cloud, and now all of a sudden you got email. So how are we securing those devices in that process in our homes, right? Because it's extremely cost ineffective for us as business owners to buy firewalls for all of our employees. And then how much does that increase your labor costs when you're not only trying to enforce regulatory policies on your company, but now you've got to handle the technical needs from the labor aspect to support all of that. It becomes quite daunting.
To that point, if you're if you're an MSP that's been primarily doing IT work, and now you're getting requests for different aspects of that, maybe a board member or an investor or some angel investor has asked the end user, hey, I want an assessment done, right? I want an assessment done of where are our devices, which ones are vulnerable, which ones are connected to, critical devices. What do we need to be aware of? We partner with Security Studio to provide that integrated security assessment for them to be able to provide that. And we at IGI, our sister subsidiary, also provides assessments and vCISO capabilities and penetration test capabilities for end users to assist the MSPs. How do you get started when that kind of request comes in and you've been primarily an IT support organization in the past?
For me personally, and anybody that I know and that will take a half second to listen to me, I tell them to don't think they can do it themselves out of the gate. Going from an MSP to an MSSP is a huge investment. And even if you were able to go out and find a guy like we found, right? If you're able to go out and find you a topper, right? Well, that individual still has to come in, and then they have to fix all of your systems, right? So you're MSSP compliant, and then they have to start rolling out programs. So it's really it should be a very thought out and stepped way to do that. The way that I recommend it, I'm not telling people they shouldn't be an MSSP. What I'm saying is be logical about how you go about it. We have plenty of fantastic partners like yourselves that either know someone or provide a service, right? So if you need to get into it, if you think this is where you're going, then I would encourage everybody to start off with finding a partner that provides the services that you're looking for. What that will allow you to do is that will buy you time, allowing you to logically develop a security practice before you get into it. Now, the other part of that is, why are you getting into it? I mean, that's a great question. People say, well, I got to get into it because it's the next thing coming. Well, that doesn't mean you got to get into it. What are you great at? If you're great at customer service, if you're great at doing projects, and that's really your bread and butter and what you're the best at, you're doing the QBRs, you're doing the VCIO services, you're doing management and sales, and you're helping them with all that stuff, and you're great at that, then you may not need to go to MSSP. What you need to do is find a partner that provides you those services to allow you to continue being great at what you do while they're being great at what they do. That's when we also talk about right now, there's a huge staffing issue, right? We know that across the board. I mean, everybody's having a hard time finding people. How Gradient's gone from 13 to 45, I don't know. Like, that's one of the craziest growth rates I've seen in years. But it's super hard to find people. So you're taking the staff that you currently have that's probably already overly utilized, and now you're trying to put security on top of them outside of their normal day-to-day. So now you're really kind of overworking them and stressing your company. So I always say, if you're going to start anything, start out with a partner that can get you going, cover those basic needs, while you logically develop honestly a good business plan that will show you ROI within a given time frame, because it's coming out of somebody's pocket. Whether you're owned by an individual, whether you're owned by a family, whether you're owned by a venture group, whatever the scenario is, while you build that program out, somebody's got to pay for it. So do it logically, do it methodically, while using a partner that allows you the time to build that out.
Got it. No, that's great advice. I think it gets back to something, that we see that I'm there's always one driving factor for a small or medium enterprise size business that needs the next thing, right? Whether it's a board member or an investor that says, what are we doing around vulnerability management? If it's somebody, a C-level executive that says, what are we doing about cyber insurance? Or, oh, by the way, all our servers are now maintained by an MSP. Do they have cyber? Does our MSP have cyber insurance? So if something happens, you know, does the MSP have protection, and do we have protection? We see a number of different things like that, plus just the whole areas of compliance, right? The auditors are now saying, you know, what are you doing in these areas? You know, we had Ron Ross from NIST on a couple of weeks ago. He showed a chart that probably had, you know, 25 different compliance organizations that, depending upon what industry you're in, what vertical you're in, what geography you do business in, you may need those compliance requirements just to do business. And if you're an MSP, you know, you have to think about all of those things when those different requests come in. And, you know, maybe that's where, you know, kind of mentioning, maybe we'll start with cyber insurance and we can move to compliance. But, you know, if you're an MSP and you get asked, what kind of cyber insurance do you have to support your own business? You know, what do you suggest people do? And then we can talk about some of the things that we're doing with some partners like Cowbell and Cysurance.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So the industry as a whole, specifically cyber insurance, freaked out like 6-9 months ago, right? So when all this came around, it's like, oh, you got to have cyber insurance. You know, these insurance companies were just writing policies. They didn't know what they meant. They just knew they needed to have a policy in place so they could make some money, so they could sell to companies. And then what happened is everybody started getting hit. Everybody started writing these big paychecks to hackers and to ransomware and all this stuff. And they're like, wait a minute, we got to do this. And then they started putting more effort into it. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, about middle of last year, as people were coming up to renew cyber insurance, they were like, you can't have cyber insurance without 2FA. And then now the insurance companies are starting to regulate it. They're starting to get more of their hands around the overall aspect of it and who they're coming after, right? Because they don't just come after. So if you're a company and you get breached, right? So the honest truth is the breach will tell you where the fault lies. It may not lie with the MSP. It may lie with the company. I mean, that's internal investigators, right? So the big thing is what you got to be able to do is, so they came down with the two-factor authentication. They're getting their hands around it. They're doing more and more because they want all these things in place so they're not paying all this money out. Because what happens is when they pay that out, they're going to go after the company that paid the ransomware, right? But then what's that company's lawyer going to do? They're going to come after the MSP, right? So they're going to come after that MSP, and then the MSP cyber insurance has to get involved. And now here's something that I don't think is a lot talked about when we talk about cyber insurance, and specifically the dirty word of being breached or ransomware or any of that. As an MSP, our go-to is to help. We want to get that company up and running. We want to get them going as fast as we can. The problem is the moment an MSP takes the initiative to rebuild a server, rebuild a computer, rebuild any of that, you've lost all forensic evidence, right? So now you're dealing with the fact that you, quite honestly, tampered with the crime scene by doing what you just thought was right. So part of what you got to talk about when you're talking about cyber insurance with your cyber insurance provider is, in the case that something happens, what process do you want us to go through, right? So now maybe you're an MSP and you got some loaners on hand, right? And you can loan them, you know, an on-prem device. Maybe you're an MSP and you work with a cloud provider that, you know, can spin you up easily while containing the crime scene, for lack of a better phrase, to get that company back up and running so they can investigate it. But cyber insurance has so many things to around it that as an MSP, you really got to know what your steps are legally in the process of a breach. So you're quite honestly not putting your own self out there to close the doors, because some of these are huge lawsuits.
Well, and to that, you know, the other thing that is, when you mentioned the cyber insurance policies, now they're all coming up for renewal, right? Mm-hmm. So now you know, if you will, the crazy documentation that got written the first time, so people had something in place, now they're starting to get paid on, and now it's renewal time, and the numbers are going up, you know, exponentially, and the coverage is shrinking at the same time, because just the general education and awareness is changing dramatically, which is one of the reasons why, as I mentioned, we did this partnership with Cysurance and we did this partnership with Cowbell, because we now know MSPs that are doing continuous scanning during normal business hours, they're very quickly going to need that capability. And we want to make sure that's one of the things that we're offering to people if they want it, kind of on an a la carte basis.
Mm-hmm. Very, very much so. And that's what we've seen as they're renewing, and they're saying, no, here's the things that the insurance, it's like the old HIPAA law, right? HIPAA came out, it had no teeth, right? It was just a general regulation. Same thing with cyber insurance, right? It came out, they were loosely written, there wasn't a lot there, but as with HIPAA, as it grew and it gained some teeth and there became penalties, now we're seeing cyber insurance take that same path. They're starting to redefine it. And quite honestly, it takes an expert to know it, right? I throw it right up there with insurance and benefits, right? If you're a company and you're providing insurance and benefits to your employees, there's no way that you're going to know everything. So you got to have a good partner in your cyber insurance insurer, right? Or your broker that can really explain these things out. And then on top of that, you got to have an MSP that works with that. So one of the ways I recommend MSPs mature into that pattern is stop resisting the change that's coming. You can't do anything about it, right? You're not going to beat an auditor. You're not going to beat an examiner. You're not going to beat the government. It's the bottom line. Accept it. The sooner you do, the less stress you're going to have, the less pills you're taking for acid reflux, because it's not a big deal. If you really want to be ahead of the game, figure out the way they're saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we suggest this, we suggest that. When they say they suggest, that means it's coming down the road. It just hasn't got into a regulatory function yet. So you're going to do it either way. So the idea is, when I say work with them, it's watch the patterns that they're telling you, watch what they're suggesting, implement those early. And then what happens is, now all of a sudden you're going to be seen in your community, right? It doesn't matter if you're in Minneapolis or Kansas City or Denver, you're going to be seen in your community as a progressive MSP provider that's actually taking those steps ahead to get you ahead of the issues that are coming, so you don't have those issues when they come up.
So we got a question from that came in on LinkedIn before we started, specifically about Gradient. And while this isn't a commercial for Gradient, I think it's important that people, they ask the question, so I want to be responsive to the folks that are logging in. You have an integrated set of tools that you're providing to make MSPs more productive. And without going into great detail, maybe you could talk a little bit about the problem that's out there and why you guys chose to do what you did to help these MSPs, because I think it's a piece of the maturing side of this business.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's really, if you think about it, it's kind of it's just another avenue of what you guys are doing, right? You guys seen there was a need in the MSP industry and you wanted to help with that need. Well, same thing here. So people for the most part know the history of Gradient, right? So Colin and Ryan, they had an MSP, they grew it to 4 million. It was acquired while they were there. They found a problem that MSPs have, which was tracking down everything that engineers have access to. And that's where Passportal was born. It wasn't born for the industry. It was born because Colin was like, are you kidding me? That took 30 hours? That's horrible, right? So then Passportal was growing, so on and so forth. But Colin and Ryan are serial entrepreneurs. Like, what's the next problem? And because they're based in that MSP world, right, that's where their roots are. Their roots are in MSP. Their roots aren't channel, right? They want to provide, they're passionate about providing solutions for MSPs. And that's one of the things I always say is one of the most unique things about this company is you can't sell our product. Like, you can't go sell our product to somebody else. It's meant, we used to say in every shop I had, I always say we were the cobbler's kid, right? Owners always have the oldest tickets. That's just how it works. But now what you have is you have a company that's focusing on specifically MSP problems. Now, when they looked at all of them, one of them they settled on pretty early was, how much time it takes to do billing. And let's be honest about it. It's not a dirty secret. We all know it. Nobody talks about it, but nobody's billing is accurate. It may be, there's people out there that may be 100% accurate, but it's because they spend many, many man hours making it accurate. That's the only way they're getting paid correctly. The majority of the industry makes it about 90, 95%, calls it good, sends it off to invoicing, right? So the problem is twofold. It's, are you getting paid for the services you're providing? And are you paying for the services you're using, right? So it's kind of a cash flow thing for me, right? It's money in, money out. That's MSP brain. That's how I think. Cash is king. Now, the other part of that is, how much time does it take? I personally have spent hours. People I know spend hours, and I'm not talking about invoicing. I've heard this conversation. I've seen the comments. It only took me 8 minutes. It only took me 12 minutes to do billing. No, it only took you 12 minutes to do invoicing, right? That means after you send it to the accounting package. Who's looking through your contracts to make sure you're charging correctly? Who's looking through your vendor invoices to make sure you're paying correctly? We can all talk about, I got a report and either I haven't been charging this client or I shut that service off months ago and I'm still paying for it. So in short, what the billable solution does for MSPs, we say time and money. The reason why we say that is because what we do is we allow you a very easy interface to compare what you're charging your clients for to what you're paying your vendors for. So that easy comparison, and then we allow you to change the PSA, and we can go more into that later on down the road. But it's really that super fast visual. I always tell people I love stoplight reporting, red, yellow, green. That's what I want to see. If it's green, I really don't care. If it's yellow, I may look at it. If it's red, that's what I want to know. That's what the UI for Billable does, is it actually shows you visually very quickly where the changes are. And what I love about it, and what I loved about it as an MSP, is I'm not hunting things down and searching for where those changes are. It shows me the client, it shows me the count, and it shows me the product. So I know that if I upload a product from, let's say, LionGuard, well, if you've been watching the news, we just made a huge launch today. Our first huge integration was with LionGuard. But the idea is, it says you're looking at the LionGuard CSV for company XYZ, product 365 or whatever, and it shows you very quickly where that is. So cash in, cash out, how do I see it quickly so I can move on with my day? Time and money. That's the problem they've seen. People were spending too much time trying to figure out where their money is and is it in the right place. And that's the problem that Gradient solved. That's the first problem of many that they're solving. I can't wait to announce some other stuff as we go further down the road here, but that's what we're about, solving MSP problems. Stop being the cobbler's kid. There's someone out here to help you.
Well, it's great to hear you say that. You guys are doing a phenomenal job really helping MSPs become much more productive, so they can focus on, the client side of their business. To your point, focus where the client is, focus where the opportunities are. We partnered with Threat Advice, and Threat Advice has a fully integrated stack of security solutions that they sell to MSPs, with the whole idea that in one-stop shopping, that MSP can now move to the MSSP environment to be able to support the clients the way they want to do it, in very kind of incremental steps. Because we see that as we see the role that we can play is kind of twofold. How do we provide continuous scanning so you know what devices are on your network, which ones are vulnerable, which ones are connected to critical data, as well as when a new alert comes on, how do you see that and how quickly do you see that? We talked to a client the other day who literally scans every device they have, but it takes them 90 days to scan all their devices. And it's hard to imagine that in a 90-day period, their auditors, their their executives, their investors, their board members, just their employees would feel comfortable that that's where they are. And I think that's changed in the last, 3 years. 3 years ago, people were comfortable once a quarter or once a month or on a Sunday night looking at what things we're doing. But with the rate and pace of attacks, that has just dramatically changed what people need and how they go about it. And
I
it's
think you're
fascinating to watch
spot
that
on
change.
there.
What?
You're absolutely spot on there, because it's like we are being required to do more, but we have less to do it with. So how do we find the right partners that can do that? Because I mean, we're on here to talk about maturity, right? You want to become mature. So let's talk about some base figures. Base figures are, from a technical aspect, is a technical person should be able to handle 350 nodes. Now, that's not people, that's nodes, that's anything connected to the network. So if you want to know real quick if you're under or overstaffed, right there's the message for you, right? 350 per technical asset you have in the company. That will give you that, right? But that's just the base standard, right? Now, if you want to say, I'm really mature, I'm really an efficient MSP, how do you get that number to 400, 425, 450? I heard one the other day, it was 600. How do you do that? You have to put time back into the human element. And how do you put that time in there? How do you mature to give I always call them the greatest asset, right? That's just hands down your greatest asset, your people, right? How do you give them time back? It's finding products like you're talking about, products like Gradient, that are making these old manual processes that took so much time more efficient through automation. Now what we're doing is we're using the humans to spot check and to ensure what we're doing is correct, and we're using the automation to make the process more efficient, right? Same thing you're talking about, here's a solution to make you an MSSP. If you want that in-house, great. But what I'm hearing is you've already got something that they can put in place as they develop more of a logical plan, and they can do it in a step feature, so it's easier on their account, right? Because that's the other thing we talk about when we talk about maturing MSPs, is how do you account for price per user, price per device?
Something I'm always curious about. We've had a number of MSPs come to us in the last 60 days that, they have a full software solution stack. They're using Nodeware from a vulnerability continuous scanning standpoint. And now they're saying, I'm getting some pushback from my clients on what we're doing, what we need to do, what we should be providing for them. So we actually have them coming to us and say, can you introduce us to your other side of your business to get an independent third-party risk assessment or get an independent third-party penetration test, so they can then use that as far as their report to say, here's what an independent organization suggested or identified that we as the MSP can then go put together a solution for. That to me didn't exist, 120 days ago, and now we're seeing it rapidly. Are you seeing more kind of independent assessments, independent pen tests being required so the MSPs can put together a quality proposal?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go. That's gonna be a two-phase answer. So the short answer is absolutely yes. I see that, and I've seen it for some time. But the reason why I've seen it is because I have a huge background in the banking industry, specifically community banking, right? And I always get the two mixed up. There's audits and exams. Once they get 3 times a year, the other one they get once a year, right? But these are done by third-party entities, right? So when we talk about that, these are people that come in that are inspecting our work, inspecting the MSP's work, much like what you're being asked for, to say, are we doing it right? Once again, here's a way you can mature and grow. Don't take that as a threat. If you're an MSP and you're taking an outside audit as a threat, you're missing an opportunity. What that's really doing is showing you the future of where regulations are coming from. Now, working with banks, I had to be SOC 2, right? That just made my life easier. It's way easier when I go into a banking institute and say, I want to handle all your work. I have all these other clients, yada, yada, yada. And they say, what's your security? And I say, I'm SOC 2, right? Because what I'm not doing is I'm not depending on my vendor SOC 2 to get me into the door. And I have to provide that, right? So absolutely, I'm used to being audited and examined and out, you know, it's like the doctor's exam when you're over 50, right? You're going to get inspected one way or the other, whether you like it or not. But it's how do you take that on? Take it as a sign of here's ways that I can improve my business and I can shore that up. Now, part of that too is now all of a sudden there's another labor cost in there. How do you figure out how to add that in? How do you figure out how to add in your services as an MSSP to get their security piece, right? So that's something we have to teach a lot of people too, and that's something that they're going from. We still have a lot of people out there on a break fix model, not an MRR model, right? What I want people to understand is when you're on an MRR model, you're allowed to build out whatever you want. Don't ever say in any of your contracts, don't ever name a piece of software, ever, right? It's up to you. It's your discretion. You're the expert. If I want to move to this AV or that AV, or I want to go back to Microsoft Defender, that's my choice. They're expecting me as the SME and the expert to make that decision for them, right? But when you go to that MRR model, that price per user model, now what you're building in is your stack. So you build your stack the way you want it, and then that's what you're selling, right? I used to have a product years ago, and this product was expensive. I mean, it was buku expensive. And that product always got brought up in every meeting that I sat at around inspections and how much it cost. As soon as I integrated that product into my price per user, I stopped almost immediately having that conversation. And then the conversation comes, right, inevitably with the client, well, can I take this out or can I take that out? Well, the answer is no. And why is that answer no? And how do you explain that to the client? The answer is no, because I'm responsible. The MSP is responsible for their infrastructure, right? And if something happens, who are they going to go after? They're going to go after the MSP, right? So the answer is no from an aspect of one, becoming mature is efficiencies, processes, and procedures. When you're supporting 20 different antiviruses, you're not good at any of them. When you're supporting one, you're great at it, right? So then what you do is you explain, like, listen, if I break this out, if I do kind of this a la carte menu that you're asking me for, it's essentially going to be more expensive for you because now I have an added labor cost in there to figure out an educational aspect, how to support an aspect, and the unknowns related around it.
So, you brought up something interesting around MRR versus break fix. And I'm curious, as you guys look at the world, the ecosystem, as you will, of MSPs, how many do you think there are? How many of them do you think are break fix IT only? How many of them are, for lack of a better term, getting started in cyber hygiene that we talked about a little bit? And how many do you think are, a rich, MSSP set of offerings? And then how do you see that shifting 12 months from now?
Yeah, I think I think the industry is only going to get stronger. Our issue is staffing, right? Our issue is heartbeats right now. I think the industry is going to get stronger. What I've seen is those that are first getting into the industry, they tend to be more break fix. They tend to be more based on an hour, right? And keep in mind, this is the old where your engineers had to bring in 2 times or 3 times what their salary was. So you're constantly out hustling for that next project because you don't know, right? If you're a break fix shop or you're partially a break fix shop and you're just getting into MRR, the problem is you're still hustling for those monthly projects, right? Why? There's no reason to do that. So you see that really more with the early adapters into our industry, break fix, I'll take on a project, I'll do that. And then as they're maturing and we can help them understand how to take what they're doing, right? And for me, it's pretty easy, right? It's because I've done it so much. But part of that is if you want to get into it easy and you want to secure that money into MRR versus break fix, well, take what take what they've spent over the course of the last year or 6 months add it up and then divide it by 12 or 6 or whatever the scenario is, and there's your MRR cost. Now, what you do with that is you actually increase that cost a bit and you add products to it. Why do you do that and how do you sell it? It's a value add. I'm actively taking care of your environment versus you calling me. So yeah, it's a little bit more expensive. It's not much more expensive than what you spend with me on a semi-annually or an annually basis, but you're getting more for the money because I'm actively doing some of this for you, which is covered under the contract. So that's what you see. You see them start out early on, break, fix, take what they can get. Then they start moving into a little bit of MRR, may still be break, fix, may be charging per device. And then they start understanding, okay, well, do I really care about the device I'm supporting, or do I care more about the person I'm supporting? Well, we're here to help. We care about the people. The bits and bobs in the background are regardless to us. We know them because we love them, and that's where our hitch is. But to the end user, all they care is they click on the mouse and it does whatever they want it to do. So that's where you see the maturity. You see it go from break, fix, a little bit of MRR, moving into really that price per user or an entire bundled feature.
You know, it's one of the reasons, you know, we looked at and we created about a year ago these public service announcements that we do approximately every 2 weeks around this cybersecurity thought leadership seminars. And we do them so, you know, we have access to people like Ron Rost at NIST or Tony Sager at CIS 18. You know, we have Jay Leak, who was the former global CISO at Blackstone. He's coming on as the managing director of SYN Ventures, talking about what is a board member or an investor looking for cybersecurity as it relates to a small or medium-sized business. And we give all of our partners, we give them custom registration links. They can sign people up. They can attend those sessions. They can ask questions in advance. And anybody that signs up through any of those custom registration links, we give all those leads back to our MSP partners for them to be able to follow up on, because they can't get Jay and Ron and Tony. You know, we just had Gary McCallum, the former global chief security officer at USAA, talking about the cyber industry and the cyber insurance industry. And if he went to work for a small business, what would he do immediately, right? These are invaluable opportunities, and we're doing them as much as anything else to provide opportunities for MSPs, for prospects, and for sales opportunities, because we think, you know, that's what they need as much as anything else, because they don't have time to do sales, they don't have time to do marketing, but we want them, and we want to matchmake everybody we can with a local MSP to provide local assistance and local support. So it's one of the reasons we did it, and it's something, you know, we continue to you know, aggressively make available to our partners.
And you may not be thinking about it the same way that we think about it, but you're doing the same thing, right? Like this is stuff you do every day. You have the knowledge. You're worried about the ecosystem of the MSP and how to make it more solidified in a healthier industry, right? So because of what you do, you have access to all this stuff. So you bring that in and you're just providing education because you want to see people do better. I think at the base of all of us, that's what we want to do in this industry. We're helpers. How do we help? Whether it's through education, whether I can introduce you to somebody, whatever the scenario is. You know, one of the things on that is I used to have this practice that I empowered my technical people. You do what's right by the client, the money will work itself out. I think the more that we as an industry and an ecosystem as a whole move towards that. Grant, we all got to make money. We all got to provide for, you know, our families and our children. We got to keep our businesses active. I get that, right? But through education, through providing knowledge that we have or connections that we have to help others out, it just seems like naturally the back end will take care of itself, and people are happier because they're like, oh man, I love working with Stuart. You know, he provides all this stuff to us and he doesn't ever ask me for anything in return. It's because you're caring about the industry you're in and the people you work with and those clients that you have, right? It's such a bigger picture than the exchange of dollars.
Well, and you know, for the people that are listening in, you know, obviously Tim and I are very passionate about building the MSP community, growing the ecosystem, maturing the ecosystem. If there are other organizations that you think share this same vision, you know, we'd be happy to have them on this partnership series that we're going to continue to do around how do you mature the MSP ecosystem. We think that's critically important. So if you have some people, if you have some organizations that you'd like to see included in this, you know, please let us know. As I said, we're going to do the next one in June. It's on our website. I think it's on the Gradient website. You know, we've got this up. It'll be on LinkedIn. You know, we're going to look at the conversation from the other side, right? What's an end user going to ask an MSP, and what does an MSP need to be prepared to answer? So, you know, make sure you join us in June for that session. If you've got speakers, if you've got questions, please let us know that. You know, we'd really appreciate that, because once again, you know, I tell people all the time, I think we are, you know, the quickest time to sale and the shortest sell cycle of anything that the MSPs have. And I say that because you can ask two questions, right? Do you know what devices you have on your network that are vulnerable, and do you care? And do you know when a new alert comes on, and do you care? And if the answer is yes, you know, no to either one of those, then you've immediately identified a prospect. So once again, it's all about how do we improve the productivity of the MSPs so they can be successful and they can be effective. And you know, Tim, I'm just curious of, you know, your perspective. Once again, if you're an MSSP that's doing a lot today, you know, what are some things you ought to be thinking about as the market changes?
Honestly, I mean, if you're an MSP and the market changing, where's the market changing, right? It's continually the push to the cloud. I think a huge market out there right now that's not being addressed are how, I mean, what over 50% of just us in the US are work from home now, right? How are we securing those devices that belong to the company, make sure they're not getting hacked, breached, ransomware, whatever the scenario is in these homes? There's got to be some answers. There's a few answers out there on the internet already. I don't know if they're quite the right answer yet, but I think that's where the market's growing, right? It's, you know, you got companies out there like Zoros that can do a great monitoring job on the home machine while they're working, but how are you securing that machine when it no longer has access to a giant controller that's constantly feeding it policies and procedures? I think that's where the industry's got to go. We're only going to work from home more. This whole, you know, real estate, you know, commercial real estate took a huge hit, right? It's going to continue to take a hit. We've proven that we don't need to be in an office. How do you secure the home PC and take care of the home user? Because that's going to be the primary focus going forward in the future.
Well, that's what I told you. You know, the continuous scanning capability to be able to see those devices, especially to your point in the remote workforce. You know, they're connected to a home Wi-Fi. There's all sorts of things. If you're in an urban environment, it may be your neighbors on your Wi-Fi that you don't even know about, right? So it's not only.
Do you even know how to? Is there anybody out there that's just taken? Is there any security expert out there that's just taken the basic steps to create a 5-minute YouTube that says, here's how to secure your home Wi-Fi? Now you'd think it's out there, but has anybody taken it and distributed it to their employees saying, hey, here's how you do it so that your neighbors aren't on your Wi-Fi? Because I guarantee your grandma's still using your Netflix login, right?
Of course.
Like we got to stop sharing and being more secure about what we're doing in our home offices. Work from home is going to only continue to improve. Work from the world is coming. People are going to start. I mean, we've seen it huge, right? The moves out of New York to the move out of California, we've seen it. How are people going to be? How are you, if you're a Canadian company, going to support your employee working out of Mexico? We got to secure them at home.
Like I said, we provide free sensors and free alerts with all the Nodeware subscriptions. And it's amazing the number of people that on a corporate device are running a network sensor because of their home Wi-Fi, and they're worried about what's out there. So that's a great point, I think, to end with. Once again, we're going to do this again in June. So if you have any questions for us, if you've got any additional speakers that you think we ought to add that are interested in helping this ecosystem be more mature, be better prepared for the, quite frankly, the onslaught of end user organizations that are going to need assistance, that kind of thought the bad guys would never find them in the past, now realize the bad guys are probably going to find them, and they're going to need an MSP. They need to be matched up. They need local assistance, local support, whatever that means, whether that's basic break fix or whether that's cyber hygiene or whether that's full MSSP type stack solutions. You know, we want to work with organizations to build out that organization. You know, Tim, I appreciate you taking your time to do it. I'm looking forward to doing this again in June, and hopefully a whole series we can do on building out this ecosystem to be more mature.
No, absolutely. I absolutely enjoyed having you on. It's a great day to do it and talk about it. You know, we over here at Gradient, we did a huge announcement today with our first partnership with LionGuard, and it's to the point. How do we make it more efficient? How do we allow you to do more with less? And I think we're both aligned when it comes to doing that.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time. We're a minute over, so I apologize for that. But we'll see everybody in June. We'll also see you on our public service announcement sessions coming up with Jay Leak, as well as our open demos if you want to go to our website or LinkedIn and sign up for those. Thank everybody for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next session. Tim, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.